is about what it's like to actually go pro in track and field. Any athlete that has ran track and field has had this thought of, hey, it feels good to win. I worked hard and I want more success. And then as that success comes, sometimes with these athletes, it comes down to, I really want to go pro. And I found myself in a space where I really wanted to go pro in track and field. And so, just as a quick disclaimer before I go into what it's like, I'm going to be only covering the things that I ran into, the challenges, the situations that became more realistic. And I'm going to go through the solutions of how to actually overcome those challenges on another video. But this video specifically is just the honest truth about what being pro actually is, what it feels like, and the challenges that if I was aware of these things ahead of time, then I may have had a completely, or I will have had a completely different experience within the pro process and could have done it for a lot longer. But with no further ado, here is my story, my example of what I ran into. And hopefully, this doesn't discourage you. It's just a simple view of what I went through and how it worked for me. Okay, so the first thing is in college, I had this expectation, right? Where I was at the time ranked in the US for Division II and just overall in the US. And I was like, man, I can see myself doing great things. And so I would picture what pro would be like. And so at that time, I had a full scholarship. I was in the dorm, so I had friends. I had a social life. Everything was in this world that I lived, right? I had a coach, I had an assistant coach, I had access to Wi-Fi. I had access to a personal or private trainer, a therapist. Anytime I had any aches or injuries, I can get taped up. All these things, right? And so I as I continued this process, I was just like, man, like all I got to do is just improve, nothing else. Right. So I didn't know what I needed. I just knew that all I needed to do was jump 8 inches or 10 inches further, that I was going to be in a great spot. Right. So that was my expectation. Then I thought about, okay, if I get better, then I'm going to be able to travel the world. I'm going to get contracts. I'm going to sign with Adidas or Nike or any other brand. And I'm going to I just was in the space of euphoria. Right. And I was just like, I'm so excited. And for most of you guys, that's exactly what it feels like. You're just like, it's my senior year of college and I'm going to go pro. Well, my senior year, I had a hamstring injury, and that was my second hamstring injury. And I was just so frustrated with the process of weight training, the process of practice. I felt like I was heavy. I felt like I was not performing at the best ability that I could. So, fast forward, I moved to New Jersey from California for a job out there. And long story short, the job didn't work out and I moved back. And but when I moved back, I literally had nothing because I got rid of everything when I moved to New Jersey, thinking I was going to be living out there forever. And so, as that process went, I came home. My mom was like, I can get you into a place, for a room to rent, but that's it. There's no more support I can give you. So when I came back, I had to start all over again. And that's one thing that I will say for college athletes is you're going to be starting, or post college athletes, you're going to be starting from scratch. At that time, I didn't have a job. I just moved into my place, but I ended up finding a job and all those things worked out. But when I really sat down about the things that I really needed was, now that I'm a pro athlete, what did I need? And what I needed was a coach. What I needed was a place to train. I needed money. I needed food. I needed a personal trainer. I needed a strength coach. I needed, more friends. I just needed all these elements that I really took for granted because I had them in college, but I didn't have them when I was as a semi or post collegiate athlete. I was like, well, how do I get to pro? Right? I was just stripped of all these things, and I never thought about being stripped of all these things simply because I always had them growing up. Right. So, another thing that I want to talk about is I didn't have any shoes. Right. And it's like, how are you going to perform without cleats, without food to, to fuel my body and etc. So, then the next part that's very important that I really overlooked was yes, there's 24-hour fitness, there's LA Fitness, there's these national gyms that are out there. And at that time, they didn't have the amenities that I needed. As a post collegiate athlete, I'm doing hang cleans, I'm doing power cleans, I'm wanting to like drop weights, I need racks and all these things. They didn't have these resources inside of gyms. It was free weights and machines, and that was pretty much it. Nowadays you do have gyms that have these, but back then they didn't. So I was trying to find a gym that can fulfill the needs that I had. And then also, I didn't have a track, right? All the tracks in my area, Southern California, are basically high schools, right? So if I wanted to train, I couldn't train in the afternoon. Why? Because high schools were using the field. I couldn't train in the like early afternoon, late morning type of time frame because the schools were using the track for PE classes. So now I was really stuck. So I'm, 25, 26 years old, and I'm having to work out at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I'm not used to that. I had weights in college at 6, 7:30 in the morning, but I didn't have to get up and physically train. And so that was something I really had to adjust to. But again, all these things I didn't really know that they were there, right? So then the part that I talked about before was having a coach. This is something that now, as a coach myself, I really see that many athletes don't notice. But for example, in college, I would show up to practice. The coach is already there many times because the coach is there all day. The coach has multiple groups, right? And then when we had track meets, I would actually travel, drive, or fly, or bus, or whatever, to a track meet, and the coach would be there, and the coach would be there for the whole track meet. I would literally show up, I would run my hurdle race, and then I would, jump, and then the coach would be there. But when I realized you don't have a coach anymore as a post collegiate athlete, it's like you don't have coaches that are just around. If you do hire a coach, then they're there for the hour, maybe. Most coaches aren't going to just be around for 3, 4 hours to train you because that costs money. And as I said before, I was no, stay on. Did it freeze? The live time stopped. Oh, time is ticking. Looks like we're back on connected. All right, sorry about that. Lost connection. So talking about coaches, right? And so the coaches in college would show up and be there all day. However, when I was looking for a coach, I was like, well, if a coach comes and I pay them by the hour, well, then the coach is going to be here for 3 or 4 hours. I don't have that extra money to be able to make that happen. So I was in a spot where I realized I literally had nothing. And even when I was training, I had to go buy some training flats, and I had to go to a place where I can get the cheapest shoe. I remember I had some bright yellow and black and white shoes that were so ugly, but they were the most comfortable shoe from Burlington Coat Factory that cost 20 bucks. So I picked those up, and it was just very, very uh, eye opening to realize I literally had to start from scratch. And this is one issue that I do feel that's going on with track and field is there's no farm system. There's nothing to help develop athletes. Now there are resources for athletes, but they got to be top 5 in the US. You have to have these certain accolades just to get to that point. And I was in a spot where I was like literally just jumps away from being this national world class athlete. And I just needed, you know, track and field are really having issues because when you graduate college, this is what we run into. And I thought this is something that I ran into a while ago, but the reality is it happens all over the place. I have athletes that were recruited or drafted for the Major League Baseball out of high school, right? And then they were able to make money while they played up through the ranks. But with track and field, I'll get into a little bit later on, they don't have these resources, right? So that's the first point that I really want to make sure I kind of plant that seed that you're on your own when it comes to that process. All right. So now the next part was I had to figure out my actual training program. And what I mean by that is, again, when you have a coach, the coach says, I know what I'm doing, I know how to develop you. do this program and you're going to excel. Well, when you don't have a coach, you don't have a program to take. So now I already knew that, being injured and the process of training that I was going through in college, I was like, I'm not doing that again. Right. So to dive into that little side tangent, basically when I was in college, I was a hurdler and I was a triple jumper. And my coaches would debate back and forth on what days I should train because, when I was doing my speed work, we were doing tech work for triple jump. And then all of a sudden I'm doing hurdle training, but then we're doing speed work for hurdles and etc. And I never really was able to get in a real rhythm. Then I had to decide, I'm going to focus more of a primary jumper because I felt like I had more, um, less resistance to succeed in that sport. So then that was that, right? But I just felt that in the weight room, I was super strong. I was literally lifting 415 pounds, 4 reps each leg, Bulgarian single leg squats. And I was super strong. I was dense. I was powerful. The problem was I wasn't like functional, right? I'd be on the runway and I felt like I could move, but I just wouldn't retain the movements the way that I really wanted to. And my frame is when I lift and get strong, I actually hold muscle really well and my muscle memory builds up really quick. The problem with that is as a jumper, I was literally 6'2", 195 for most of the season. Most jumpers now are 6'2", 6'3", 170, right? Samir Lane is 6'1", 185, I believe, and he's considered one of the bigger jumpers. So, Christian Taylor's maybe 6'2", 175, 180 pounds. So I was always a bigger, heavier jumper. And so now you combine that with massive training, running, and then my poor eating habits and all these resources in college that I did and didn't use. I just was just heavy, right? So then I told myself, okay, how am I going to plan out this calendar? So then I decided to put together a calendar of my own. I put myself through workouts, and the hardest part with organizing this workout was that the workouts that I would put myself were our normal tough workouts. You guys know when you run and you're just like you finish your reps and you're just like I can't breathe. I just want to quit. Like I'm just done. I can't do it anymore. My back is hurting. I got butt lock. All these things. But then you keep going because you have a teammate next to you. You keep going because your coach is yelling in your ear. You keep going because you look up and see the banners and you wish to see your name up there as the national champion. Like all these things come into play. But then I'm over here at 7 a.m. trying to hurry up my workout because the high school is going to be coming out soon. And when the bell rings, I got to get off the campus, right? So all these little factors were coming up. And I also was doing a program that I didn't know was going to work, right? So fast forward, I ended up coaching or training at a athletic training facility, which was great. Um, and they had, the squat racks. They had, a super treadmill, which went up to like 28 miles per hour. It had a 40-inch incline on that treadmill. And so I was able to get real actual training, but that's where I met Rick Stassi. And Rick Stassi went crazy. And he had this psychology around training the hip flexor, training the soleus and the Achilles, and getting those really developed to be able to use your maximum range of motion and performance, right? And so his training was basically based around force output. So instead of doing our traditional 5x5 squats and hang cleans, right? We would literally do 500 squats. We would do 500 yards of lunges. The shin jumps that are now popular, we would do those and we would do those for like hours. And so the training practice was we would technically create the force, I would say around 10,000, 20,000 pounds of pressure during that workout. And so obviously during college, I would work out and I would be sore for the week. I would be so sore and I'd be like, man, that's the hardest workout ever. Then I worked with Rick Stassi and we didn't touch one weight at all. And I literally couldn't walk and I was more tired and more fatigued from those workouts. I've witnessed grown men throw up within 10 minutes of these workouts. And it was very, very intense. And so I lucked out with getting his strength You know, by getting his strength training and then taking some of his concepts, right? But then I would apply the track. So in 2010, when I made the USA Championships, I really did not jump at all on the runway. And I literally did not touch a weight at all that season. I only did functional body weight training, and I only jumped when I jumped in competition. And I was able to PR, and I jumped really well. I had the most, I think I jumped 50 feet every single track meet. Um, and I believe I went 50 feet 8 from 10 steps at the NAU indoor champion track meet. And I just really was really working really well. So I was able to find that piece, but again, I didn't have someone to roll me out. I had to ask people at the track meet, hey, can you watch my step? I had to figure out where to get more shoes and spikes from. I had to figure out how to make more money. Like all these things were a big factor that were hard for me. And the other part when it comes to working is you can't work a 9 to 5 when you're trying to compete at a very high level because 9 to 5 requires you to be there from 9 to 5. And typically you work 30 minutes away, 20 minutes away from work, and you got to show up and you're sitting all day. And all these things are distractions. So if you work a part-time job, it works better with your schedule. The issue with that is you only get part-time money. So, now with social media, you can make a lot of money through all those avenues. But back then, it was very tough. And I'll get into another video about brand building and how to get an actual sponsorship, how I was able to land with Two Times You and Zenza. So, but the last part you want to talk about when it comes to working out by yourself is like when you're working out by yourself, sometimes you just don't want to get up in the morning. You're just like, I'm tired. I was just busy last night. Well, I still got up and I still trained. And the phrase that actually kept me going through this level of movement and staying devoted to my goals was this is what it feels like. I would tell myself every day when I would get up and be like, oh man, I'm too sore. I would say, shut up. This is what it feels like. Because if I didn't want to go pro, then I can just stay in bed. If I didn't want to go pro, I don't have to go to this practice, right? And there were many times where athletes would see me and be like, yo, you jumping really far. Like, where do you train? And I tell them, they're like, hey, I'm going to come. So they would come. But one time I waited for that person to show up and they were 5 minutes late. And I was like, yo, you cut my workout short by 5 minutes. They're like, yo, it's okay. But I'm like, no, the school bell rings, at the same time. And we need to be off the track by that time. So I told myself, I'm never going to let anyone back me away from my success. And so whenever people would say they want to train, that's great. I'm going to be training. You're welcome to do whatever I'm doing for the day. I'm not going to sit and tell you what I'm doing. I'm not going to correct your form. If you want to work out with me, just do what I'm doing. Leave me alone. And I kind of left it at that. And that really helped me perform at a very, very high level because I knew that even people that were coming to train with me, I had to be better than them. Because if I want to be, top 5, I need to be better than that person right there, right? So those things is kind of went through my head. So the next part that I want to bring up is mental health in the sport of track and field as a post-collegiate athlete. Now, the mental health piece, I luckily, had a library next to where I lived, the Irvine City Library. And I walked over there and I literally had like $10. And I went over there and I dropped 25 cents or 50 cents or whatever it was into the book thing. And I was able to get multiple books with 25 cents. It was 25 cents per book. And there's two books that I got that stand out that literally changed my life. And those two books were The Power of the Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy and Peak Performance by Charles A. Garfield. Two books, I'll have to do like a video separate just for that. But those two books literally changed my life. What I took from it at that age, 28, was The Power of the Subconscious Mind. It let me know that my subconscious mind was a software within my body, and my conscious mind was the actual user. So I would think something, and as I would think something, my subconscious mind would say okay and then do that because I realized, oh well, my heartbeat, beats at a certain rate and etc. And it beats faster whenever I'm doing exercise. So I was able to kind of program the process. So I started playing around with, okay, let me see what I can do with this, right? And so one day, I decided to tell myself to wake up at a very specific time. It was like 5:34 a.m. or whatever. And I woke up literally seconds before that actual time frame happened. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. But I was like, but I didn't really sleep all the way because I was trying to wake up at that time. But then I kept doing it over and over again. I kept waking up at the same time. And I was like, man, I think my body's really listening to things that I'm telling it to do. And so, what I took from that book was that my body was going to do whatever I tell it to do. So whenever I was tired, whenever I was like done with the workout and I was like, man, I can't get through this workout, I would tell myself, shut up. This is what it feels like. Get it done. And that made my body respond in such a way because I was able to enjoy that process and I was releasing dopamine, which I found later on, to where I actually was yearning for that challenge where I felt like I was going to fail. And then I was able to actually overcome that. And I got better at that piece. Now, Peak Performance by Charles Garfield, that book basically it talks about how to mentally train yourself, right? It talked about the Soviets at that time would utilize visualization. Obviously meditation is a focused, devoted time towards thought, and they would utilize these things, and they had these EKGs, or not EKGs, but basically they would test your brain waves and see your thought patterns. And they realized that when you think something, your body responds to it, just how the other book said, right? But it said basically, like if you were to see yourself running fast or jumping, your muscles would actually fire as if you were actually running. So your body not just didn't just feel like it actually would work as if you would do it. And then the author had this example of he used to be a Olympic lifter. And he decided, you know what, back in my day, I used to be able to lift, I think it was like 375 bench press. And it had been years, like 10, 15 years. So he was like, you know, I'm going to try to bench that today, right now, without any weight training practice or anything. So he literally visualized his process of lifting the weight numerous times, did that for, I think, an hour or something like that. I read the book years ago, so I might be missing some points. And he ended up lifting his max weight that he did when he was training at his highest level. And what caught my attention was, you know, these things are possible. I just had never heard of these things happening in real life. And I just kind of like realized, wow, if you put your mind to it, you can actually achieve it. And people would always say that growing up, but I never really tried it. I never really saw what it looked like. And so then there was another part of the book where it just kind of talked about think about your best moments in performance and where you were physically, mentally, emotionally, the things you were accomplishing, what was your life like. So I brainstormed this process. What was my life like when I had my best performance and I was at the top of my game and I had all these things that were around me, and it said, okay, duplicate that. Go get all those things and put those things, not all the same things, but put those things together and see how your life moves. So what I took from the power of the subconscious mind was um, that I can tell myself, my body, to do things and operate certain ways, and it will do them. The thing I took from the Peak Performance book, so once I wrote things down, when it came to my process of training, my process um, of just my whole process, basically, I then was able to achieve everything. So those 3 seasons, actually two, 2.5, I wrote down specific goals, and I'll get into another video for this one. But I wrote down specific goals, and I achieved every single one of them. I wanted to be ranked in the U.S. I was, finished 13th in the U.S., PR'd at the national meet with no coach, didn't jump at all on the track outside of the track meets. The next year, I finished sixth in the U.S. at USA Indoors, PR'd at the meet. No, I didn't. I PR'd the meet before. And it just everything was falling into place, right? And other things that I had off the track with when it comes to money, when it comes to my lifestyle, when it came to cars, my food, all these things actually manifested as well. So I just kind of kept that really rolling. Okay, so that's that side part when it comes to my direction. But the other side, when it comes to mental health, was I was lonely. I didn't drink. I didn't have a social life. I was literally training, coaching back at home. I didn't own a TV, neither did I have a goal. I would visualize, I would meditate, I would listen to music. And no one knows this, but I'm going to say it because this is family. So, what I would do is I would rap, right? So that was my emotional outlet. That was the way that I was able to let go and get my creative juices flowing, but also talk about what I was going through. And one of my friends in the area was an artist. He's a rap artist, and he was broke too, and he had no way to record his music. And I was like, well, I have a computer. I can get a microphone, so I can support you with that. So I literally had to learn how to engineer music. And I was able to engineer his stuff. And I was like, but he doesn't record enough music for me to get better. I started just playing around with sounds and recording my voice and so on. But then I started writing things down. And me writing things down, I felt myself enjoy that process. And it felt like therapy to me. So now I'm like, man, like these are things I'm going through. Let me just lay that on a track. Let me rap. And, I had no intention at all with any of my music going out. And don't even ask me in this chat at all if you can hear it, because the answer is no, right? But I will say that that was my therapist essentially. I was able to let my emotions out. And when I go back, because I still have the mixtapes, I literally made like four different mixtapes with many, many tracks. But what I did realize was that first album I was hurting. I was sad. I wasn't happy, right? Now, was I satisfied? 100%. I was satisfied with my life. I was satisfied with the things I was accomplishing. However, it wasn't the whole thing. And I had this visual image in my mind, and it's like, you ever see like in the circuses, if you ever go to a circus, and they have like this guy that's spinning a plate, a glass plate on a stick. It's just spinning on a stick, right? But he has like five different plates, and he's running back and forth balancing, and he's balancing one, and the other one over here is wobbling, and the suspense that's happening is like, oh my gosh, like how is he keeping his balance? I realized that that was my life, right? But at that time, I was only spinning one plate, and the other plates were broken. They were on the ground, already broken. And I was spinning this plate, and it was spinning perfectly. I was at the perfect level of performance. I was on the threshold of, hitting the A standard. And it was tough because when I would look at these broken plates, broken plates, I would feel hurt. I'd be like, man, like I don't have peace. I don't have a car. I was riding my bike to and from work and to and from workouts to go work out, to come back home, and then when the winter would hit, it was cold, all these things, right? So again, a lot of a lot of things were missing in my life at that time. And so the challenging part that I'm trying to get at is make sure that you have an emotional support, because you're going to need it. And it's not just the support about your sport, it's support about your emotion, because I really do feel that there is a quarter life crisis. And I was in a space where I had to really find myself spiritually. And no matter your belief, whatever it is, go with it. If you don't believe in anything, great, then find something to just focus on and believe in, right? Um, that actual faith that you have within yourself, within your higher self or being, or whatever you want to call it, is very important. And I was able to find that within myself, and I was able to keep myself sane, because if not, then I would not have known what to do and where to go. And then the next thing I want to talk about is the athlete management process. So the athlete management process, basically as a post-collegiate, is you got to figure out how to manage yourself as an athlete. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's just do the simple math. Each track meet at that time cost about $25 per entry. If I wanted to do multiple events, it would cost $25 per entry. If I had to drive 45 minutes to an hour to the track meet, that's fine. I had to just pay for gas to get there and back. Didn't have the teammates, so I didn't have teammates, so I had to figure out how to get there and back with gas, packing food. Many times I would get to the meets and I didn't have anyone to warm me up. So I would have to make friends at the meet to help me get through the process. And the great thing about it is athletes pretty much flow together. Like you're going to have the same competition at the elite level. And so you get to talk to them, but not all the time do they want to support you in beating them. So, you know, so when you add up, a 10 track meet season, well, that 10 track meet season is going to be $250. It doesn't seem like a lot, but it's $250 just to walk through the gate, right? Not including all the extra things. If you have 3 track meets or, 4 track meets in a month, then you're adding, those things add up. Not to mention if you have a travel meet. The travel meet basically, it was a flight, which can be anywhere from $150 and up. Then you have a hotel stay because you're not close to home. Well, that's going to be about $100 per night. And if you're choosing to stay 1 night or 2 nights, that stuff adds up. So now you're looking at $300 to $400. And then for USA championships, it was, I believe, $500 for the whole trip itself because and then I had to get a hotel and then the flight, obviously. The entry was $25 for the event and I needed to eat. I can't just pack a lunch and bring that to the hotel. So, I had to get all these pieces. And then while I was competing, I needed to make sure that I had the proper foods for my body. So all these things added up. But luckily, I was sponsored at that time. But these things do add up, and it really starts to cause an issue. And then the last thing that when it comes to management, yeah, the last thing when it comes to management is I had to overcome injuries. Injuries are part of sports, and when it comes to track and field, you can have a pulled hamstring, you can just have soreness, you can have a cramp, like whatever it may be, right? These things are just normal. Like I have scratches all on my hands and arms from playing basketball, like those aren't anything serious, and we're going to keep it that way. But like these scratches are part of the sport itself. And so when I had a pulled muscle or my fascia in my back was tense or tight, like I needed the support, but I didn't have insurance because I didn't have the money and I didn't have the time to get insurance because I was trying to go pro. And so all these factors come into play. And I hope this didn't discourage you. It just really comes down to when you choose to go pro, you want to make sure that you have all of these ducks or so lined up. You want to make sure that you already have the resources, the trainers, the coaches, the commitment for these coaches, a backup coach, a coach who's going to maybe train you at the practices, and a coach that's going to keep an eye on you at the actual events, or a friend, or you teach a friend. It's going to be a lot there. What I will say is I think it was about $2,000 that I needed to have back then just to make sure that I was fully funded to live out my dream. And the issue with that is it still wasn't enough. So, when you do get these contracts, the contracts need to be able to cover a lot of things. And as you utilize these resources, it does compile and it requires more support. So you need to make sure that you have friends that are close to you that will be supportive of you, a person to talk to, the resources when it comes to money, and etc. But again, I'm not going to ramble too much because I'm going to go into detail on another video about the other side, the great things about going pro and all the opportunities that can come up. But these were the things that I ran into and why I didn't go pro for too long because I didn't know how to get out of these situations that I was in. But I know you can do it. And the goal is for you to do it because you watching this video, you'll be able to make sure you get all these things figured out beforehand. So if you have any further questions about what I just talked about so far, please send me an email at info@KeinanBriggs.com. You can comment below. You can also send me, check out my website. I'm going to be revamping that real soon. And the reason why I chose to do this live version is because I got a new microphone. I got the Blue Yeti microphone, as you can hear it, and I decided to let me just test this thing out and see how it goes. Hopefully, you guys enjoyed it. But yeah, so check that out, and I may or may not be doing more of these live ones, but simply send me your questions, and I'll be able to answer it, and I'll be seeing you guys soon.